Okay, so today we're going to be taking a look at lesson 4, the opposite of a number. So this should be fairly straightforward because we're going to be looking at non-zero integers and their opposite. So if we look at exercise number 1, where we're walking the number line. So each non-zero integer has an opposite denoted as negative a. And negative a and a are opposites if they're on opposite sides of 0 and the same distance from 0 on the number line. So we're thinking about 0 being that center point. So for example, if we look at the number 2, okay, so there's positive 2. Its opposite would be the number that's the same distance from 0 in the other direction. So in this case, we would think about 0 and going the opposite direction. 1, 2, we're at negative 2. So we would say that 2 and negative 2 are opposites because they're the same distance from 0 in opposite directions. Same thing with 5 and negative 5. They're opposites because they're the same distance from 0 but going in the opposite direction. So for each number to the right of 0, there is a corresponding number the same distance from 0 to the left. 0 is going to represent the reference point when locating a point on the number line. It also represents the separation of positive numbers from negative numbers. So opposite numbers are the same distance from 0, but they are on opposite sides of 0. Okay. So let's take a look at example 1. So every number has an opposite. So if we take a look at this number line, going from negative 8 to positive 8, we're going to locate the number 8 on the number line, mark it with a dot. Okay. Now, its opposite is going to be the number in the same direction that's the same distance away. So if we look at 0, we're going to go 8 to the left. Obviously, the opposite is going to be negative 8. So explain how they're related to 0. Okay. So negative 8 and positive 8 are the same distance from 0. Okay. Now if we take a look at 2 and 3, so we're going to locate and label the opposites of the number on the number line. So we're going to mark A at 9. Okay, B is at negative 2. C is at 4. And then D is at negative 7. Okay, so we should be labeling our number line like that. Okay, now we think about some real-world situations where we would have these positive and negative numbers. Okay. So for number 3, write the integer that represents the opposite of each situation. Explain what 0 means in each situation. So for example, if we look at A, 100 feet above sea level. Okay, so that's going to be 100 feet above the level of the sea. Okay, so we need the opposite of that. So if we're 100 feet above sea level, the opposite of that would be 100 feet below sea level. In that case, negative 100 would be the opposite. Now, in this situation, 0 is representing sea level. Okay. Now we take a look at letter B. So now we need 32 degrees Celsius below 0. So again, we want the opposite. So the opposite of that would be 32 degrees Celsius above 0, which would be a positive 32 degrees. So in this case, our 0 is going to represent 0 degrees Celsius. And then looking at letter C, we're going to make a withdrawal from our bank account of $25. Okay, so withdrawal means we're taking money out. So the opposite of that would be putting money in. So the opposite of a withdrawal would be a deposit of $25. Okay, so the opposite of a negative 25 would be the positive 25. So in this case, 0 represents no change. So the amount of money we have in our bank account has not changed. So if we take a look at example 2, another real-world example. Okay. So Maria decides to take a walk along Central Avenue to purchase a book at the bookstore. On her way, she passes the Furry Friends pet shop and goes in to look for a new leash for her dog. Furry Friends pet shop is 7 blocks west of the bookstore. She leaves Furry Friends pet shop and walks toward the bookstore to look at some books. After she leaves the bookstore, she heads east for 7 blocks and stops at Ray's pet shop to see if she can find a new leash at a better price. Which location, if any, is farthest from Maria while she's at the bookstore? And we're going to determine an appropriate scale and model the situation. So let's go back into our situation and find the important information. Okay, so she's going to purchase a book at the bookstore. Okay. On her way, she's going to pass the pet shop to look for her leash. Okay. Now, Furry Friends pet shop is 7 blocks west of the bookstore. So she leaves Furry Friends and walks towards the bookstore to look for books. Now, after she leaves the bookstore, she heads east for 7 blocks and stops at Ray's pet shop. Okay, so we need to figure out which location is farthest from Maria while she is at the bookstore. So we think about our situation here and determining a scale. Now I see I have 7 blocks and 7 blocks. So those are fairly small numbers in consideration of the number of tick marks we have on our number line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label our number line starting at -8, just so we're going just a little bit past the numbers that we need. Okay, so we're going from -8 to +8. So now again, we're thinking about what's happening in the story. So the Furry Friends is west of the bookstore. So we're going to make the bookstore 0. Okay, because now we need to head west, and then we need to head east. So 7 blocks west would be at -7, okay, and we'll label that as Furry Friends. Okay. So now, after she heads east from the bookstore, she's going to go 7 blocks east, and that's going to be Ray's. So in this situation, 0 is going to represent the bookstore, because in the explanation, each of these 2 pet shops is being referenced in a different direction from that bookstore, west and east. Okay, so the pet stores are actually going to be the same distance. Okay, but in opposite directions. Okay. And again, both of the pet stores are being referenced in relation to their distance and direction from the bookstore. So in this situation, the 0 is going to represent the bookstore. Now, it's important to think about how we phrase these responses. So, for example, furry friends, we would say is 7 blocks to the left, or 7 blocks to the east. We would not say -7 blocks from the bookstore. We also wouldn't say -7 units from 0. We would just say it's 7 units to the left or 7 units to the right, or -7 or +7. So now taking a look at our last page, we have a few more situations. So on the number line, locate and label a credit of $15 and a debit for the same amount from a bank account. Okay? So a credit you're adding, and then the debit means you're taking the money out. Okay, so in this case, we're going to label our 0. Okay. Now I see that I have 3 tick marks in each direction, and I need to get to 15. So I'm going to make each of these worth 5. Okay. So now -5 would be our $15 debit. And then +15 would be our $15 credit that's being added to our account. So now again, it's asking us what the 0 represents. Okay, so in this case, 0 represents no change. Okay, no change to the balance of our account. So now on the next number line, we're going to locate and label 20 degrees Celsius below 0 and 20 degrees Celsius above 0. And again, what does the 0 represent? So we have 0, and I can see that I can count by tens in both directions. So this would be 20 degrees Celsius below 0, and then 20 degrees Celsius above 0. So in this case, the 0 represents 0 degrees. Okay, 0 degrees Celsius. So then the last one, a proton represents a positive charge. And write an integer to represent 5 protons. Now an electron represents a negative charge. Write an integer to represent 3 electrons. So proton, positive, and we have 5 of them. So 5 protons will be represented as the number 5. 3 electrons, remembering that the electrons are negative, we have 3 of them. So we would represent this as -3. So now, to close up, remember that a non-zero number and its opposite are both the same distance away from 0 on a number line, but they're on opposite sides of 0. We would use the given number to find the distance from 0 on the opposite side. The one key here is that everything is being related to 0. So 0 would not have its own opposite. Every other integer would. So now please give the exit ticket a try before you watch the next video.